Jesus Christ!
Not quite. Keys, where are they?
In the cab!
Thanks.
It's next in second!
Don't worry. I'll take good care of her. Oh, yeah.
As a longtime fan of the Bond franchise when it comes to both the movies and specifically the games, I can't really emphasize enough just how rough we've had it over the last few years. And while we did get some absolute bangers back in the day with stuff like GoldenEye, obviously, Everything or Nothing, and arguably the best of the bunch, Nightfire, the video game adaptations otherwise haven't really treated us the best. I mean, to put it into perspective, the last James Bond game we got was 007 Legends back in 2012, which looked like this. Well, that's all about to change with the release of 007 First Light, developed by IO Interactive, famous of course for their groundbreaking work on Kane and Lynch 2 Dog Days. With their latest effort being, without a doubt, I'd say the best Bond game we've ever had, at least since Nightfire back in 2002. Where what they've done here is absolutely capture the essence of the character from start to finish.
That's simple, huh?
That's simple.
Building him up from this young rookie to a capable and confident super spy.
Bond. James Bond.
One who globetrots from Malta to Slovakia, Africa, Vietnam and Alaska as he beats up bad guys, beds baddies, and uncovers and ultimately thwarts a plot that threatens the entire world.
Housekeeping, I presume?
I mean, it's not perfect, nothing ever is, but this is about as good as a Bond game ever needs to be. And while the world is not enough, this just might be. So let's find out why that is, shall we?
Looking for these?
Hold on.
Now, it should be said right off the bat that this is a cinematic game, which means it has a very, very slow burn. And it's not even until you're about 2 or 3 hours in where the whole thing starts to really kick off. It does have that typical cold open that we're used to from the films, only this isn't some kind of cool, awesome sequence involving Bond kicking ass. Instead, it shows the guy before he's even working with MI6, where he's a simple air crewman on a routine mission in Iceland. Portrayed this time by Patrick Gibson, who does a really good job with the character. Not to mention, he did a super underrated performance as a young Dexter Morgan in Original Sin. And here again, he gives us a much younger and inexperienced version of a character. This time as Bond, after his chopper is shot down where he's left as the only survivor. Having to sneak around behind enemy lines and not get killed, guided only by the voice of Miss Moneypenny.
How can I help if I don't know what's going on?
By doing exactly what I tell you.
Yes, Mom.
All of which is pretty slow to get going, focusing a lot more on the narrative aspect, which honestly had me a bit worried. Considering it also involved a whole lot of modern gaming tropes, like hiding in grass to stay hidden, climbing up and across ledges, along with squeezing through tight gaps. Because if there's one thing that AAA games love, it's squeezing through tight gaps. Eventually though, you find your way to this nearby outpost that's been taken over by this hostile military faction, and can start sneaking around and collecting intel, introducing us to a few of the stealth mechanics, in the way that you can distract enemies and also sneak up and take them out from behind, as you sneak around the place undetected and rescue all these civilians from getting executed.
Listen, we need to get you out of here.
It even lingers for a moment on Bond's first kill, really highlighting how much of a big moment that this is, with it being the first time the guy's ever taken a life, which, as we know, to become a 00, it takes
2.
And overall, it's a cool cold open, ending in an exciting sequence as things start blowing up, where in typical Bond fashion, he somehow makes every single thing he comes into contact with highly explosive. Where about the only thing I'm not buying is how he's somehow able to make this quad bike destroy an armored car.
Bullshit!
After that, we get the title sequence, before it then flashes forward to Bond arriving at MI6, where we assume he's going to be getting a serious reaming out, meeting this iteration of Moneypenny for the first time too.
Just got assigned. I'll be the girl in the chair.
Where it also sets up a pretty funny little running gag, where every time he's about to say his name, someone always interrupts him, or he doesn't quite get to say it in that trademark way.
Do you have an appointment?
The name's Bond.
James Bond. He's with me.
He then meets the new and recently instated M, who says that despite his recklessness back in Iceland, she's actually decided to bring him on as an agent in the 00 program that she's just brought back. with the main plot there being about how MI6 have recently started using this super high-tech AI system for tracking and solving all these threats around the world. With this system having previously stated that Bond had a 1% chance to succeed in that earlier mission, with that being a deciding factor as to why she's brought him in and also why she's brought back the 00 program. Because she sees the unpredictability of human logic as a necessary element in the spy world.
You see, I strongly believe that there is still a need for such human flourishes as heart and intuition in modern spycraft.
And it is a pretty interesting, not to mention relevant plot, that would have worked really well if it had been in an actual movie. Like, it's that whole thing of AI replacing jobs meant to be done by humans, and whether or not that's something that's ethical or something that can even be trusted.
You did an impossible thing. I would like you to do it again.
Either way though, it's for that reason that he's been bumped to the top of the 00 program and sent off for training in Malta, led by a dude named Greenway who's also a former 00 agent.
Yes. And you're late.
Played by the same guy who played Morgan in The Walking Dead, but more importantly, he played Sol in Snatch.
It's a fucking anti-aircraft gun, Vincent.
Eventually acting as a bit of a mentor for James, though initially he just sees him as a bit of a reckless wildcard who can't be trusted. Even though Bond pretty much excels at every single test he's given.
You think I've overstepped?
With him really getting thrown right into the deep end there alongside all these other recruits, where he promptly gets his ass beat up by... me?
Monroe, will you do the honors?
Love to, sir.
No, seriously, like, am I going crazy or is this dude my doppelganger?
Okay. Show me what you got.
It was at this point as well that I'd started to notice how very little gameplay there'd actually been. And it was like an hour or so, if not more, into the story, and I still hadn't really done anything. Where it's starting to feel more like the Netflix adaptation of Bond's origin, with this entirely new cast of side characters. With two people in particular, these agent perspectives named Cresta and Munro, that's me, forming a close friendship with Bond specifically.
We have a lot of work ahead of us, but not a lot of time.
And each mission really feeling like its own self-contained episode. Uh-oh, another episode. Though it does have one of the most creative tutorial sequences I think I've ever played, where it's more like a movie montage. Jump cutting back and forth between different training modules, from the driving to target shooting and running obstacle courses.
Something like that.
Which is all pretty standard as far as the gameplay goes. It's just that during the platforming stuff, they've replaced yellow paint for white, with it finally ending in a mission in a nightclub as Bond and the rest of the team are celebrating. Because if there's one thing that IO Interactive love, it's missions set inside nightclubs. All to be suddenly called to action and tasked with tracking down a person of interest, having this really funny recurring gag with this woman who's obsessed with Bond.
That's an interesting pickup line.
Who keeps popping up and inadvertently throwing him off his game.
Oh, Christ. Could we not do this?
After this, though, is their first proper mission in Slovakia, where they're sent in there in disguise to apprehend the former 009, who's been underground for years after going rogue, but is finally surfacing to hand over information to MI6 in return for a full pardon.
Hopefully I'm the last thing on his mind.
With all of what happens next going on to play a very big role in the overall story, though for obvious spoiler reasons I'm not going to spoil that. Still though, from this point on is where the game properly kicks off. 2 hours in, dropping you into this huge opened up area, which again, in typical IO fashion, is full of dozens if not hundreds of other NPCs.
None that I'd recommend.
Where it then lets you complete the mission pretty much any way you want. Where you can really see the Hitman influence coming across there too. You know, if Agent 47 had access to a bunch of different innocuous spy toys. Early on here, you actually get to check out the infamous Q branch in person, and even walk around and mess about with all the different gadgets, with there being about 7 in total. You got a dart phone, which can stun NPCs and make them sick, causing them to leave their post, handy. There's a built-in laser for the watch, classic, which can cut through objects and also, again, stun enemies by shooting them in the eye. There's smoke bombs that can cover an area in, you know, smoke, camera that can fire out a shockwave, and flash mines that can stagger enemies.
Very good.
Followed finally by a pen missile, as in a pen that fires missiles. Yes, awesome. And I defy anyone to try and find a single reason to complain about that. With Bond's brand new Spankin' Omega watch being the main way to use all of these. Along with this thing also letting you scan the environment for important clues. Basically, it's your see-through solid objects ability that we get in pretty much every modern games these days. but at least you get the option to choose which one you want to wear.
Stylish pick. I do believe there's hope for you yet.
With my only issue there being the whole dynamic between Q and Bond, which is a lot different, with the Q in this game just being a normal dude who's pretty much nice all the time. And that's fine, I guess, but I don't know, like, where's the fun in that? I always thought the best thing about all those interactions between Bond and Q in the movies was all the verbal jousting those two did.
Look, I haven't time for these adolescent antics.
You know, mostly just with Bond being a sarcastic smartass and not taking anything seriously, while Q was berating him for everything he said.
That's not funny, 007.
But when the two of these guys are being super polite and amicable, I don't know, it loses a bit of that fun.
Time will tell.
I thought as much.
Visually as well, we do have to talk about just how amazing the whole thing looks. And I do have to quickly thank Asus and Nvidia for sponsoring this video and sorting me out with a review key. Now, First Light is another game to take advantage of Nvidia's whole DLSS tech, using multi-frame generation to create that perfect balance between frame rate, image quality, and responsiveness. Where again, it's just given me this really solid frame rate and great presentation, without any drawback in performance the entire time. And you can really see all that stuff coming together when you watch it in motion, with it having some insanely detailed environments and character models, with those areas packed full of NPCs coming to life the most. First Light does support ray tracing as well, but unfortunately it wasn't implemented in the game pre-launch.
The first time for everything, eh, Bond?
But even still, like, the lighting in certain areas just looks stunning. And I know I've said this like a whole bunch of times now, but I really feel like we're past that threshold where in-game graphics look the same as what the pre-rendered stuff used to look like, especially here with some of the character models during certain cutscenes. I really like the detail too with the scar that Bond's got across his face from the crash in Iceland, which slowly heals throughout the game, being very prominent during the whole training montage, but by the end of things far less noticeable. So yeah, overall it's a great looking and great running game. And Nvidia's got a deal going at the moment here too, where if you buy an RTX 50 series card, you can get a free copy of First Light thrown in as well. With Asus also running a really cool competition of their own, where you can enter for the chance to win either an OLED gaming monitor or a Wi-Fi 7 ROG router. So yeah, be sure to check out the links in the video description, and once again thanks to Asus and Nvidia for sponsoring this video. As for the gameplay, well, this is broken down mainly into stealth and combat, with the stealth in First Light being as much as it is about sneaking around outer sight as it is sneaking around in plain sight, where it might have one of the most enjoyable stealth systems I've seen in a video game in a long time. If not just for the sheer amount of ways that you can interact with the environment and other NPCs, where it really does start to veer into immersive sim territory. Your first order of business in Slovakia is to just get inside the hotel, but seeing as you're dressed up as a chauffeur, they're not just gonna let you in.
Not exactly the 5-star treatment.
So this gives you a couple of different options. And the way that I did it was I eavesdropped on a conversation where someone had said that they'd hidden a press badge nearby, which I then ended up grabbing to make my way past the security checkpoint.
There. Forget my own head next.
But even this is only one of 10 different obstacles you got ahead of you, and it quickly becomes this really fun loop of trying to discover all the different options you got. You can chat to NPCs who'll often outright give you important clues, you can read notes which people have left lying around, or even just eavesdrop on someone else's conversation. Which also might be the most defining element of a 2020 James Bond experience. Seeing Bond pretend to use a smartphone so he can listen to what someone else is saying without looking suspicious. Sometimes guards or other NPCs are patrolling in areas you're not supposed to be, and you can distract them by doing things like hacking into a radio or just anything else nearby to get their back turned. You can bypass locked doors or vents with the laser watch, you can sabotage air conditioning units to create some kind of a smoke screen, or just blow up fire extinguishers or bags of cement. And in fact, pretty much every prop in the game explodes in some way if you interact with it. You can even just hit someone with a dart from your phone to temporarily stun them, which is kind of handy as well if they've got a key card or something else you need to pickpocket. With almost every mission having like half a dozen of these kinds of scenarios, where you're just given total freedom. And while all roads might lead to the same place, how you get there is up to you. The only thing you have to consistently worry about is making sure your gadgets are topped up with energy as well, which is done by looting either electronic or chemical items, which is kind of funny the way Bond walks about and just kind of rubs his hand over everyone's shit. What's definitely the coolest feature in the game, though, is this whole bluffing mechanic, where if you're ever caught sneaking around and have got enough instinct points, you can shit-talk your way out of pretty much any situation.
Touch nothing and stay out of my way.
Touch nothing. Got it.
Which is totally on brand for the character as well, where he always says something based off what he's been caught doing.
Did you do this?
I found him like this. I even checked for a pulse. Twice.
Some guards aren't going to fall for it though, at which point you can fake surrender, acting like you're giving yourself in, only to then sucker punch the person and take them out, which is pretty cool and again on brand.
Take it easy. I'm not looking for a fight.
Call an ambulance! But not for me!
Instinct points can also be used to lure people to your position, which is a really handy trick, where Bond's also clever enough to make sure he drags them out of sight before he chokes them out. So while you can see how a lot of people are going to compare this to the Hitman games for obvious reasons, I think it's still doing enough of its own thing here to not feel like a carbon copy. One thing it definitely does share with the Hitman games though is how it can often be very trial and error, especially during certain sections where you might need to replay them like a few times to really get the hang of where enemies are patrolling. It also does weirdly lack a few mechanics from those games as well, like the option to drag bodies out of sight, which just seems like a huge omission, and often ends up with you just piling up bodies one by one as enemies keep coming to investigate the same spot.
What?
Oh yeah, and also too, save for like 1 or 2 moments in the entire game, you can't ever change outfits or put on some kind of disguise.
I worked a treat.
Another thing that's really interesting about First Light and also separates it is that compared to a lot of other stealth games, you pretty much always have to get in close for a melee takedown to actually get rid of someone. Which is handy too, considering takedowns are one of the main ways to earn more instinct points. And although you are armed with a gun, you can't pull that thing out and just cheese your way through areas by popping everyone with headshots. In fact, I think there's only one area in the entire game where you've got a silenced pistol that lets you do this.
What?
Even those stun darts you fire from your phone, they only stun enemies for a short period of time. And you still need to get in there and finish them off with your hands. Yeah, story of my life. Which kind of makes sense as well if you think about it. I mean, during all of the movies when Bond was sneaking around, he wasn't going around shooting people in the back of the head. In fact, most of the time you can't even fire weapons to begin with, unless enemies are actually shooting at you first, where the game shifts into the aptly named License to Kill mode, where the rules of engagement are changed and you're able to defend yourself. Outside of that though, you've got to rely on your intelligence and wits. Yeah, big brain stuff.
Shit, that's not good. Yeah, tell me about it.
And a big component of the gameplay there does involve Bond throwing hands, with the melee combat being, I don't know, adequate, based around parrying these highly telegraphed attacks or just dodging them entirely. It's just that it does feel kinda janky given how contextual it is, with your moves being based off whatever you're standing near. In the sense that if you're near a wall or a solid object, Bond's usually going to forcibly slam the person into that object, where if you've got more room, he'll just use the same couple of combos over and over, with the camera often being as much of an opponent as the enemies are. The only times it ever really gets tricky is against these so-called brutes who are tougher enemies with their sleeves rolled up, because as we all know, when you roll your sleeves up, your toughness factor goes up by 300%. Whereas when your collar is popped, your likelihood for sex drops by about 3,000%. Anyway, the jump-in challenge between fighting these guys and everyone else is noticeable, where you're better off just cheesing them by hitting them with one of your gadgets and calling it a day. The good news too is that even if you are detected and have to resort to fisticuffs, it's usually not a total wipe, and you can mostly fight your way out of the situation, mostly. With the people that you've pissed off usually just being relegated to the room you're in, as opposed to the entire building. And I think there was only a handful of times there where I got seen where it was suddenly like every single bad guy on the payroll knew where I was. And because pretty much everyone in this game knows Kung Fu, all I could do was restart from the last checkpoint and try again. Overall though, this first proper mission in Slovakia does a good job of ensuring you're up to speed with all these mechanics, considering you're going to be doing a hell of a lot more of this for the next 15 or so hours.
Nice one.
It introduces one of the main antagonists with this creepy albino assassin dude, along with you meeting one of the Bond girls named Isola.
Well, that was close.
who's also mucking about behind the scenes here and clearly up to her own agenda. And it's all just that classic Bond formula, with the bad guys constantly being one step ahead as Bond dodges fists, bullets, and STDs as he tries to find the answers.
Well, hello.
I do appreciate a lot of the references they've worked into the game too, like how when you're going through Q Branch at one point, you can come across that avalanche balloon thing from The World Is Not Enough.
Why would I be caught in an avalanche carrying a gentleman's briefcase?
The title of the third mission is a direct reference to On Her Majesty's Secret Service, and Isola even quotes GoldenEye at one point too.
For England, James?
James? For England.
A gunfight's often ended with a sarcastic quip.
That was dramatic.
You got chase scenes and plot revelations before Bond heads back to MI6 and gets chewed out by M.
Bond, you will do as you're told.
Though I do want to say that there is a disappointingly low amount of high-speed car chases in this game, with there only really being one real car chase where you're driving an Aston Martin. There's even a bit where you walk past a Jaguar 00, which I assumed was a setup for some kind of upcoming action sequence, where I might get to nick the thing and make some kind of a daring escape. But instead, the only driving you do after this is slowly across the desert in a Land Rover. And it's like, how do you fully model a Jaguar into a Bond game and not let the player drive it? The worst thing by far though is the Bond theme, or the lack thereof, with the game barely using that iconic music. In fact, it's not until the end credits where we even finally get to hear it fully. Let me just repeat myself in case you didn't hear me. The only time in a 16 or so hour long James Bond game we hear the iconic theme tune is during the end credits.
I must be dreaming.
I mean, there's a couple of times there where they tease you with that opening brass bit, but really that's about it. Even the title screen you get when the game loads up doesn't quite use the right rendition.
That's a damn shame.
And I don't know if they're trying to do this for narrative reasons, given that Bond's not actually a 007 by this point, or maybe it's a licensing thing and it's expensive, I don't know. But the sheer lack of that music is a massive bummer. I mean, we should be hearing that every 60 seconds.
Would you expect an apology?
How about an explanation?
Remember how like in the old Bond games like Agent Under Fire and Nightfire, how every time you did something cool you'd get that little stinger of the main theme? Yeah, well, I feel like that's the kind of thing we needed here. Like after you did something sneaky or clever, or survived a hectic shootout, you know what I mean? It just needed something. Even just that guitar chord would have been enough.
Thanks for the practice.
Still though, sneaking around and sarcastic quips is only going to get you so far, and every now and then you're going to have to shoot a bitch. And this is where I have my main issue with First Light. Not because the shooting is bad, but just because it's kind of run-of-the-mill. You know what I mean? It's just kind of your classic regenerating health system without it really being all that creative. What I find really funny too is how early on there they make a big deal over Bond's first kill, where they really linger on the moment to emphasize how momentous it is. And then later on during his second kill, it kinda pauses for a second as well so you can take it in. Only for the guy to just kill like a bazillion dudes after that like it's nothing. Where he should really start introducing himself as James Wick, because he's got a body count that could easily match what Keanu Reeves was putting out. I mean, all that's missing is being able to pick up a pencil and use it as a weapon.
With a pencil.
And you are going to lose count of the amount of people you kill in this game, even after that first shootout sequence in the airfield. I can see a lot of people defending this, saying, you know, but in the other games, you shot a heap of people. And while, yes, that is technically true, those games also weren't trying to be these super grounded origin stories showing Bond back when he was still learning the ropes. It reminds me a little bit of the Tomb Raider reboot, where Lara started out being all scared and fragile after her first kill, only to then just mindlessly mow down hundreds of bandits like it's nothing. Now, to be fair, the shooting does have some pretty neat ideas. I mean, I like how you can shoot people in the legs to stun them for an easy takedown. And you can also shoot the weapon out of someone's hands, leaving them dumbfounded and wide open to be body slammed into the ground. And after he does this, Bond is often going to grab their weapon and keep on going, which looks pretty awesome. Along with, of course, all those opportunities to just use your gadgets during combat as well, with there never being a bad time to use the old pen missile. The thing is, though, you don't really need to do any of that, and you can simply just shoot everyone in the head with a single shot and call it a day. The shootouts also rely heavily on lots of explosive elements around the area, like barrels or propane tanks, where it almost starts to become comical how enemies just stand next to these things completely oblivious. Kinda reminds me of the Combine in Half-Life 2, how they'd often take cover near those giant red barrels. And yes, like, explosions look cool, I get it, but it really is like dangling a shiny object in front of the player's face, kinda distracting you from the fact that you're really not actually doing anything all that interesting otherwise. Kinda makes me think back to those old games, how you could often interact with the environment in some pretty creative ways to mess with the enemies. And in fairness, First Light often does do that, just with varying results. But it's definitely not enough to break up the tedium of it otherwise mostly just being a headshot aim trainer. Early on, the game introduces enemies in heavy body armor, and you'd think that these guys would be a serious threat, but instead they're really not. They just require 3 or 4 headshots to put down instead of 1. And the same tactics you use against the other enemies you can use against them, which is kind of hilarious as well, how they'd somehow still be affected by something like Bond throwing his gun at them.
Sweet dreams.
Or how they're also vulnerable to melee attacks as well. All of your gadgets still affect them the same way too, and in some instances, gadgets work better against armored enemies. You can even take them out through stealth with the same takedowns like it's nothing. And it kinda makes me think back to the heavy enemies in the Far Cry games, where you had to outright unlock the ability to even be able to take out these guys to begin with. But nah, like, these heavily armored soldiers can still be dealt with after a few simple pistol shots, or I don't know, a couple of haymakers. And I get that it's an action game, but, you know, Bond ain't entirely built like Batista or Dolph Lundgren here either. So I'd say it's a fair criticism to point out just how ludicrous it is. How a guy with an average build is able to beat off these heavily armored soldiers with his bare hands.
Didn't see that coming, did you?
I also find it really weird how you're given so little ammo for weapons that you pick up, and when you pick up someone's gun, it's usually only got like half a magazine, which means you're constantly having to run around and pick up other weapons. It is worth noting though that for a lot of these sequences you can choose to sneak past everyone if that's something you prefer, which is still very viable and an alternative to having to kill a literal army of soldiers. So again, it is all about choice, which is nice. But the combat, like, it really is about as cookie cutter as it gets. And I'm really not trying to make the whole thing sound like it's bad, because look, that's really not the case. But I don't know, like, I guess I just didn't find it as creative or clever as the other gameplay components. It's also definitely got a whole Uncharted vibe going on, just in the way that it has that real contrast between all the walking around in the narrative segments, then combined with those moments of super high octane action and scripted events. With combat also focusing on softening enemies up with bullets and then finishing them off with melee. In fact, First Light even has a whole sequence involving all these pirates, where you're moving through an old tanker as you avoid or take these guys head on, and even ending on a cruise ship.
Watch your step.
Overall, the whole thing took me about 16 hours to get through, though by the last couple there, I was really just trying to get to those credits. And if you really take your time, well, I think your playthrough could be easily upwards of 20.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Thankfully, they were smart enough to include the option to go back in and replay any mission, and even pick from different starting points in each of them. You know, in case you're going after specific collectibles or items that you missed. The other mode you've got aside from the main story is the Tac Sim mode, which is like a series of VR training missions you get to play through.
Ever been one for nostalgia?
You're intrigued, admit it.
Where you can choose from different weapons, gadgets, and even outfits. And this seems kind of fun, but it's really just recycling areas you've already played in the main campaign, only now giving you these very strict rules and limits on what you can and can't do. For instance, it might make it so you can't pick up any weapons, or it might increase the damage you take from gunfire or stuff like that. And again, like the story mode, you're unable to fire weapons until people are shooting at you first, which in this mode just seems like a weird limitation. Especially considering there's challenges to complete where you have to beat levels only using specific guns. The idea is that the more you play these, the better you get, as you can level up, earn intel points to spend on buying new gear. Also, you can go back in and just keep playing this mode. With there being 5 escalation challenges and then 2 operations to beat. So, Yeah, 7 levels. And I guess that's a good thing if you like replaying the same handful of maps over and over with a much more limited toolset, just with the difference of being able to dress up in goofy outfits like Baron Samedi. Or is that supposed to be Daniel Craig's Day the Dead outfit? I do know that they're planning on adding more of these in over time, so you know what, there might be some more value down the track as more content is added. But right now though, I can't imagine someone playing this for more than an hour tops. Still though, my minor bitching aside, I think what IO Interactive have done here is an absolutely stellar job.
Now we're talking.
I mean, they've taken a near-dead franchise, as far as the video games are concerned, and somehow breathed new life into it, introducing a brand new iteration of the famous character, and a pretty damn good one at that.
Oh, yes, it was very dangerous.
The whole thing ends with that classic James Bond will return text, so I doubt this is the last we're going to see of Patrick Gibson in the role either. And that's a good thing, because this version of Bond, he blows shit up, he gets laid, he makes smart-ass remarks, and has that insane amount of luck where he's able to avoid constant near-death situations. And exactly what you'd want in a game where you're playing as someone with those famous 3 digits as his code name. So for the next entry, if you guys are taking notes, please just let me hear that theme tune a bit more.